Kutcher was like my second mother. Every summer, she's
Right.
the greatest thing that, yeah.
She was a mother to us and to the whole crew. Every evening she made sure she kept coming around to us and saying, "Did you eat enough?" And I thought she was going to tuck us in bed at night. And she was really very sweet. She unfortunately passed away this year.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah, just recently. And Kutcher's actually got sold this year too.
And when I was 7 years old, I married their daughter, Mady.
Oh, really?
Mady Kutcher and we also starred in South Pacific, so this was a great movie. Yeah. Ron, tell people your background a little bit, and how you got to be a documentary director.
I'm originally from New York, actually Long Island specifically, and
Me too. Where?
Roslyn, Long Island. If
You
anybody knows Roslyn. Okay, Westbury, good. I hear that. And I've been living in Los Angeles. My wife and family we live in Los Angeles now for the past 20 years. And I've always gravitated towards films of Jewish subject matter. The concept of this film was from Lawrence Richards, the writer. And he approached me and the co-director, Mevluda Kaya, and I was drawn to it. I spent a lot of summers up in the Catskills as a kid in summer camp in Monticello. Camp Tagola. If anybody's from Camp Tagola, I won't believe that. But anyway, it was a Jewish camp. And my wife's family had a summer home in Sackett Lake. And so we spent a lot of summers up there. So I was drawn to this subject. To me, it was a natural thing.
And when did you interview people like Jerry Lewis? How long ago was that?
We started this back in 2008. We started filming people and interviewing them. So a lot of these interviews are from that period. We had financial difficulties, so we couldn't release the movie until now, actually. So it took a while. That happens with small independent movies like ourselves.
And how's the movie been doing so far?
Well, I'm very happy with it. It's actually being released in about 45 different venues across the country. We hope to we will release in Florida. For those of you who have family and relatives and friends in Florida, we're going to be releasing in December. We're still playing in Los Angeles. We just are now, today I think is the last night in New York. So we've been in cities you wouldn't believe. I got a call from Red Butte, Montana, and Kentucky, and places like that. So people are actually gravitating to this slice of history.
So from the movie, I gather that being Jewish, we're funny. We have to be funny.
I think we don't own the monopoly on it, but we're certainly good at it. That's for sure. You know, these guys, if you ask me, these guys have proven it. They were these legends. We were in awe just sitting with them and interviewing them and actually finding out where their roots are from. That was really the impressive part for me, to find out where they got their training, and that's really what this film's about.
I remember I was a kid at the Catskills, but then I worked at Kutcher's for 2 summers, and I remember that, we talked about this on the radio show, sometimes a Buddy Hackett would be on the stage at 8 o'clock, and he'd be off at 9:30, and somebody had to put him in the car and take him to the Concord, because he was on at 10 o'clock, and then he was doing the midnight show at Grossinger's. Right. And this went on all week. It was amazing.
And as you heard, if they didn't have a car, they wouldn't get hired. You know?
Right.
In fact, the audiences there were very particular. As Sid Caesar said, if they didn't like it, they'd walk out. And in fact, Robert Klein was telling me about how they compared walkouts. Well, you got a 4-door walkout? I got a 6-door walkout. I got a 16-door walkout, and they only had 8 doors. So that's what happened.
I'm glad you showed the Knockers. I was telling a friend of mine tonight, there used to be
you noticed
Knockers
that.
on the table all the time.
I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah, and sometimes instead of laughing, people just would hit the table.
That's right. A lot of people don't notice that the little knockers that they had. Yeah.
What was the hardest part of getting this movie together?
Well, aside from financing, it was hard to get all the comedians we wanted. We wanted to get Mel Brooks. He was busy. Joan Rivers, busy. So we had a tough time getting a lot of the comics. But the ones that signed on, Jerry and Jackie and Sid, Sid was really terrific. He's not well. He wasn't well then. And we just had to call him up the day of, and he said, all right, come on over. He actually lives not far from where I live. So he just said, come on over. And so we filmed him. And I will tell you about some of these comics. Jerry, we filmed him in his boat in San Diego Harbor. And he sort of sat there with his arms folded like this. Like, why are you bothering me? Jerry's like that. And can you hear me? And,
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis, I'm sorry, Jerry Lewis. So, not Jerry Stiller, Jerry Lewis. So anyway, we got to his boat. First, we were eating lunch in the Seaport Village, and there's this huge blast of a ship horn, and his agent comes running up and says, "That's Jerry, and he wants you on the boat now." So we got on the boat, we filmed, we set up, we filmed him, and he was a little bit prickly, because Jerry can be like that. And by the time we finished, he said, "That's it? You're leaving? Where are you going?" And he really wanted us to stay around, because we talked about his family, his parents, his childhood. We didn't ask questions about television. So that was very endearing.
What about Mort Saul? I was surprised that he was a Catskill comedian, because topical comedians were not with the Catskills. You got up and made fun of yourself or your wife.
That's true. Mort was a bit of a stretch, I will say. Mort did perform in the Catskills. He did do the Concord quite often. But the reason why we had Mort in this is because we wanted to show that a lot of these comedians and the demise, what attributed to the demise of the Catskills, was the change of humor. And Mort was part of that, for good or for bad. But he was part of that because humor went into the political vein. Audiences changed, their tastes changed, and Mort was on top of all of that. That's a whole separate movie in and of itself. So we wanted to show the evolution of humor that started in the Catskills and where it went, and Mort was that.
Do you think the comedians at the time knew that they were like in the greatest training ground ever? Or just looking back now, they can say, boy, you know, it was great doing 3 shows a night and you could bomb.
That's a good question. I think they were probably just happy to have a job back then, you know? Just like grateful to play at some place. This is before television, so there weren't that many venues, but who wouldn't want to perform at the largest resort complex really in the world? So they just gravitated to that area.
Do we have any questions from the audience? We can open it up. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Dick Gregory said something about Hugh Hefner opening a door for the black comedians. Can you say anything about what that was?
We talk about, the lady wants to know if Dick Gregory said that Hugh Hefner opened up the
Yes.
doors for black comedians.
Yes, we didn't want to focus strictly on Jewish comedians, so we also added Dick Gregory. And actually, I will give a little secret away. Hugh Hefner jumped in because we interviewed Mort Saul at the Playboy Mansion. Mort's very good friends with Hugh Hefner. And so in walks Hugh Hefner in the middle of our interview in his bathrobe and everything, in his pajamas. And we said, well, let's bring you on in and we'll include you in the film. And it turns out Hugh Hefner has a very interesting historical footnote in stand-up humor, and that is that he gave African-American comedians like Dick Gregory their first break. African-American, as you heard, they couldn't perform in front of white audiences at all. And because of the Chicago nightclubs that Hugh was working and owned and operated at the time, he gave Dick Gregory his first break.
Yes, ma'am, right up front.
Were there very many women comedians in Catskills? You only showed 2.
Question is, were there many women comedians in the Catskills?
I think the short answer is no. No, there weren't. Joan, Toady,
Jean Carroll.
and
I remember Jean
okay,
Carroll.
Jean
Yep.
Carroll. There were very few, and we wanted to make sure we could include some. Certainly, in the, you know, there's a golden age and then there's a pre-golden age. I think Henny Youngman, to me, is probably predates the golden age. And during his period, there were no women, female comics.
Yes, sir.
I had a 41 packet, and I worked as a busboy at the Arrowhead Hotel, which is right down the road from the Neville. You mentioned the Arrowhead. What made that unusual is that was distinct from all the other hotels because it was run by 2 communists from the Newman family. Can you say anything further about that?
This gentleman worked at the Arrowhead Hotel,
Yes.
it's called, and it was run by communists. And you want more?
By the way, there are many, well, let's say left-wing and unity to a number of left-of-center hotels that did not have comedians,
Yeah.
but were New Yorkers. But that particular hotel you mentioned, and I had the car, I would stop on the west side, pick up the meat, put it in the trunk, and take it up.
Hey, he brought the meat to the Arrowhead. Do you have any comments?
Well, I don't know about it. I have to tell you, quite honestly, I don't. I know Arrowhead Lodge is where Sid got his start. That we know, and
Right down the road from the Netherlands.
that's right. And that it was closer to Ellenville, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But I don't know about that. I know some of the history. For instance, there was a mob scene up there, and there were mobsters that did dump bodies in Loch Sheldrake. We heard about that, and that was true. I don't know about communists, but that's an interesting footnote.
I confess.
Okay.
They only came on weekends, the communists. The wives were all by themselves. Yes, back there. It's like, how many hotels are still in business?
Well, as I said, Kutcher's is pretty much closed. It didn't close, he sold it. Mark sold the hotel. I think it's still open, but they lease it out. I think the Nevele Hotel is the only one left in business. They were hoping that gambling would come and save the area and save the Catskills. It hasn't happened. Some believe it's because they haven't found any Jewish Indians. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, but Nevele is about the last one left.
This lady right here.
Grossinger's? No, you saw what's left of Grossinger's. That was that ramshackle Tudor building. That was Grossinger. When we got there, we walked through it. I found hotel receipts. It was like going through an archaeological excavation. Concord, I believe the building has just been torn down. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, I think what you may have forgotten to, not forgotten, didn't mention, that there were bungalow colonies, and they would have the casino on Saturday night, where they would have entertainment, perhaps not as good as Caesar or Jerry Lewis, even though they were starting out, but perhaps lesser known, and that was also a great attraction for the Jews who would spend the whole summer in,
Yeah, we're talking about bungalow. When I stayed at Kutcher's when I was a little kid, we stayed in one of the bungalow on Kutcher's property.
Right.
And the bathroom was down the hall,
Right.
the shower was down the hall, we shared it with other families. And Wilt Chamberlain was our bellhop, and I was in the day camp. And once a week, Wilt Chamberlain would come in at night with a flashlight. He wasn't famous, and he was like the day camp guy.
I have another question.
That wasn't a question, that was a comment, bungalow lady.
Questionable.
Where did you find Joe Doran?
Oh, Joe
I
Doranson.
know Joe Doran.
Oh, do you?
He lived a couple of blocks from where we lived.
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. and we-
Yes, Joe is a sweetheart of a guy. He's also, I think he's a wannabe comedian. He's got a talent and a career ahead of him in show business. Where did we find him? I think it was based on, I think my writer found him. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember how we found him. I think what my writer found him because Phil Brown from the Catskills Institute turned us on to him. If you Google Catskills Institute, for anybody who wants to look up nostalgia and memorabilia, that's a great website and resource. And I think we founded Joe through Phil Brown.
He teaches at Long Island University.
And that's correct, right.
Okay, back there, gentleman back there, and then we'll get to the lady in front.
Mickey and Ann Freeman, are they still with us?
Mickey and Ann Freeman, we played Jewish geography.
Right.
They
Mickey,
still
I'm
have-
sad to say, unfortunately passed away. Mickey was, if you asked me who my favorite comic is, well, I mean, I grew up with Jerry Lewis, so Jerry is when I met him, it was amazing. But Mickey probably is my favorite in this film. He used to call me even after the interview once a week and tell me a funny joke. And that's for you, he would tell me. He was a sweetheart of a guy, and he passed away about 2 years ago. I think Ann is still alive. Yes.
The lady back here. Yeah, you ma'am.
In the late 80s, we had to take our daughter to college in New York. My husband wanted me to see Grossinger's. And our friends warned us, they've been sold and the young Israelites have taken over. We went, and it was very morbid and very sad. We wanted to get out, and we had to pay a $5
lady was a prisoner at Grossinger's in the 80s.
Who knew? I'll have to do a documentary about that.
That's a sequel. I was a prisoner of Jenny
Yeah, let's
Grossinger's.
talk afterward.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm a Curtis graduate, but they didn't bring out, whether it's still the same. Most of the owners in the Catskills also owned hotels in Miami Beach at the time. I was wondering if this still was the case.
The closest,
Catskills and Miami Beach.
well, the closest we got to Miami Beach in this film was the movie The Bellhop. Was that we had clips from Jerry Lewis's first feature that he directed, he gave to us, and he filmed that at Miami Beach. We really concentrated strictly on the Catskills region because we felt that that was, at least in the early side. You're right. I mean, later on, certainly Miami, people flocked there, but we wanted to concentrate on the Borscht Belt, and that was it.
Basically, that's, they made a living in the winter.
Right. Again, another sequel for us to work on.
And then there's a story of the racetrack. Remember when they opened the racetrack up there? Monticello
Right.
Racetrack. Yes, sir.
What surprised you the most in doing this film?
That was my next question. What surprised you the most about doing this film?
I don't know about surprise, but I'll tell you I was touched by people like Sid Caesar who were saying, you know, life may be hard, but you can get through it if you tell a joke. And these guys even made us laugh. That's why we had to include some of the outtakes. They made us laugh on and off camera. So for me personally, it was just great to be in their presence and make fun of life. And that was surprising. I had worked on so many documentaries that had, you know, dealt with World War II and the Holocaust and things like that. And to make a joke about life to help you get through it was a great lesson for me to learn.
Ron, how did you raise the money for the film? Because if you came to me, I'd say, I don't see it playing big in Des Moines, Iowa. I mean, they're like, you know.
We had some crazy rich people, I call them, and that were investors that helped us out. Actually, our main investor is not even Jewish, actually, and believed in the subject and believed in us and our filmmaking careers and felt that we could make something of this. So that's how we do it.
Interesting. Yes, right here.
Did most of the comedians write their own material, or did they have professional, or did they have writers?
So most of the comedians have writers. So they do
I
their
think it
own.
was a bit of both. I think if they got bigger, they'd had writers. But when they first started out, they wrote a lot of their own material, and they had help. You know, Henry Foner and Tanya Grossinger, as you heard in this, you know, they would make notes of jokes. Milton Berle was notorious for stealing people's material. So they would make notes of the jokes, primarily so they wouldn't repeat it and get caught in the act.
There's back here, and then we'll come to you, the communist. Don't worry. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I just send a couple of sentimental things. My mother was a teenager in the 40s. My great uncle opened up a hotels in the Catskills, and she used to work there babysitting the rich people's children. And then over 10 years later, my parents honeymooned at the Neville. And in 1988, I was on my way to visit my grandmother in Ellendale General Hospital, and we passed the Neville. And it was just interesting just passing it by and seeing, oh, that's where my parents went. They honeymooned in 1954. It was sentimental for me.
The movie brings up good sentiment. I love watching Simon Says because I remember how important that was.
Right.
When they played Simon Says by the pool. And,
That was with Luke Goldstein.
yeah, right. He was
on the
famous
camera.
for that. And all the old Jewish people would come to say, they
That's
didn't
right.
say Simon Says. Oh,
Right.
very
They didn't want to get off the chair. You're right,
right.
Jackie, please.
Our communists.
My former brother-in-law used to get paid for writing jokes for Martin and Lewis, and there were a whole coterie of young guys who wrote jokes for leading comedians. They got paid $1, $2, $3. Where's the money coming from? But they did have young people writing jokes.
This was as young people wrote jokes for $1 to
And
give.
got paid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, sir. Morris,
Yes. Did you ever work at Catskills?
did you ever work at the Cats?
Did I ever work in the castle? No. I was just a kid that went to camp there, and I learned how to water ski on Sackett Lake. That's about it for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Does Kickstarter help movies like this?
Kickstarter.
Please, can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Okay, there is an organization called Kickstarter, and I know they helped, for example, they helped Martin Donner movie. And did you ever approach anybody like that?
I'm familiar with Kickstarter. I haven't used it. We didn't need it for this particular production. It's tough to raise a significant amount of money that it takes to do a full, complete documentary on Kickstarter. Sometimes for completion funding and that sort of thing, Kickstarter is valuable. But for doing a film from its inception, there's a lot of competition on Kickstarter. I'm not that savvy. My kids are better on the internet for that than I am. But yes, that's a viable option which we did not choose.
All the way in the back, there's somebody holding up their hand.
I have a comment and a request. I want to just thank you, because I don't think I've laughed so hard in my life during this film. It was absolutely wonderful. And I just want to thank you for making this film. And my request is, there's a gentleman down here on the right here, and he has had his hand up ever since you started.
Well, where is that gentleman?
Down here on the right. There he is. He's got his hand up.
Okay.
Oh.
Take it away.
That's very good.
Thank you,
must
Oprah.
know each other.
Oh.
My comment is, today, it seems like there's a lack of comedy in the world, and a lot of these people were introduced, I think, through television, to people like Steve Allen, Jack Parr, Johnny Carson. My comment is this: why is somebody like Jay Leno, who's been on for like 10 years, none of these people have introduced anybody in comedy to the American public?
How would you compare today's comedy with people that were really funny, like we just watched? How's that? And you don't like Jay Leno, obviously. Oh, they're not introducing new people.
Right. Well, according to our research, the venues that where new comedians get noticed today has been comedy clubs, and beyond that, it's YouTube. That's where new comedians get noticed. Sorry?
America's Got No Talent.
Yes.
We don't see that. If you have time when it came, you don't see it anymore, so you don't miss it. Nobody misses it. Who's got a question? Yes.
I remember when I used to work in Catskills at one of the smaller hotels, even you guys probably never heard of it, but it was very much like the place that you saw in Dirty Dancing. It was that kind of
Right.
place. And probably our greatest form of entertainment wasn't just in our hotel, but it was to see how many other hotels could we sneak into when we had an off day. That was just the greatest prize that you could, was to actually get into somebody else's nightclub.
The gentleman said, it's true, when you worked in the Catskills, you either snuck into another hotel or you come back and say, I just went to the Concord and I saw this and this. The people would let you in.
That's true.
It was fun. Gentleman all the way in the back who's standing.
Do you know if any of these comics had agents or contracts?
Well, did they have agents or contracts? The Rapp, you saw two of them on screen here. Charlie Rapp was the agent of the Catskills, and his nephew, Joe, we filmed. I think he's in Florida now. And they're still in operation, so they still book talent. But it was the Rapp agency that was the agency, major talent agency for the Catskills.
Yes, sir.
Based on your work here, where do you see your next project? Following in this vein or something different?
What's coming up next?
Well, I hope to do something about, I would love to do something about political humor and take off on where Mort Saul left. That's something that I would love to do. I'm also working on a project, I used to live in Israel, and I'm working on a project about the relationship between the United States and Israel. So those are two projects that I'm working on.
Yes, ma'am.
We live in an age now of ethnic sensitivity here in D.C. Do you see the demise of Jewish humor?
Because we're all so sensitive, do you see a demise in Jewish humor? Not if people like you guys keep coming to movies like this. No, absolutely not. I don't think so. I think I think Joe Dornson got it right. The legacy of the Catskills lives on. You see it in Seinfeld. You see it in Jon Stewart today. You know, it's alive and well. It's just not the same one-liners that we heard Borscht Belt, but I think it's still alive.
Yes, sir. Joe?
Once this film is shown, will there be any way to see it again somewhere? Like, can you rent it somewhere?
Other than a theater, can people come and see this film
We
or
hope-
see it at home?
We hope to have this on television. We're dealing with, PBS right now, and we hope to get it on DVD and video on demand. And hopefully it'll stay here in this theater for a while, so you'll be able to get to see it as well. But next year, we plan a DVD release of it sometime early next year.
Yes, sir. Bruce?
By the way, the website is whencometywentoschool.com, little plug. But just so you know, if you check that website, you'll know when the DVD release is.
Bruce Messier? Oh, I'll be right there. Bruce?
I was wondering, was there a chitlin service at Catskills? Because I presume that red box, black and white, seem like that couldn't work the whole.
What was the beginning of the question? We didn't get the beginning.
Was there a chitlin circuit?
Was there a chitlin circuit up there? No.
I don't know.
Where did guys like Red Fox work when they?
That I would not know. I'm honestly not an expert on that.
Well, like African American, worked out. They weren't in the Catskills. I can say, yes, ma'am, who's standing up?
I just wanted to say that I visited the Catskills as a youth, but I was in a Broadway show that was largely based on the Catskills called Wish You Were Here, and we had the Get Acquainted dance where the guys walked this way and the girls walked that way. I actually met my husband in the show, and it was called How Do You Do My Partner. Secondarily, I worked with Milton Berle on his television show. And what's going on now with old entertainers who never die, they just go to Florida and are booked in what they call the condos, which is another, well, that's part of the condos. It's another evolution of the Catskills, and WAP, his agency, is involved. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
So we're all playing the condos.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
I have two memories that my parents would take me. My dad, my brother, and we would do whatever we would do.
Can you stand up? Some people are leaving. It's hard to hear you.
We would do whatever we would do during the day, my brother and I and my parents, and then before dinner, we'd go back to the room and we would shower for dinner. My brother was young, my mother would stay with him. And my father would say, come on, let's go down and see what's happening in the lobby. I'd go downstairs with my father, and we would go into the various bar mitzvahs and affairs that were going on, and eat the hors d'oeuvres, and he would have a drink. And I would say, I can't do that. And he would say, but everybody will think we're from the other side of the family.
That's the idea for my next movie, The Bar Mitzvah Crashers.
One of my memories that came back to the film was when I was a little kid going to Kutcher's. It was my sister, my mother, and myself, and my father came up Friday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And looking back, and then when I finally worked at Kutcher's, I thought, why is Mrs. Schwartz in the rowboat with Mr. Goldberg? And you figured something out was going on. I don't think that would happen today. No, I don't think that would go on. Boris, yes, next to Boris. Yes. Yeah.
Is it true that the Beverly is 11 backwards because the original owner had
Is
Yes.
the Beverly 11 backwards?
Beverly is 11 backwards. That's what I've always heard, yes.
Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Why didn't you show the Mahjong?
Oh, yeah, where was Marjan?
I had no archive footage of it. I would have found, if I found it, I would have put it in, but you're
Go to the
right.
Mizell Center.
If you rent the movie Sweet Lorraine, you'll see them. Plenty of them.
I want to thank you so much for doing this. Somehow, should be handed down through high schools and junior colleges and just to enrich the young people coming up, because we went on through a period where comedy was just not, I don't like vulgarity, but I see it changing, and I think this could help change comedy back to make it funny. There are no George Burns, there are no Jack Benny, Ed Allen. I mean, these are people that I grew up on the radio with. And Groucho Marx and so forth. So I want to thank you for this. It was a beautiful picture.
Thank you very much.
We all want to thank you. Yes, sir.
There's a show in New York called Old Jews Telling Jokes.
Right.
Did that have any influence on this?
We actually hope to have an influence on them, actually. They actually, they know about the film, the show, and we were doing some cross-promotion for our release in New York with them.
What was the question?
Oh, there's a show in New York called Old Jews Telling Jokes. And they're like cross-promotion of, how do they find out about each other? Jews are always telling jokes.
Always. Yeah, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Who? Is Jerry Lewis?
Yes, Jerry Lewis is still around. He's seen the movie, he loves it, and that's about all I heard from him.
Can I ask you a question? I don't know if it's... Does Jerry Lewis get paid to be in the documentary?
Yes.
Or did he do it from the goodness of his little heart?
A little bit of both, but he did get paid.
Oh, okay. All the comedians get paid?
Not everybody, but most of them did.
Mm-hmm. Jerry Lewis doesn't work for scale. Anybody else? Yes, back there.
Just the comment, I just want to thank you, this was wonderful. My husband's first job was writing for Jane Murray as a young comedian. So it's just beautiful, thank you.
Her husband wrote for Jan Murray, who was a great comedian.
Jan Murray would have been a welcome interview on this, along with Red Buttons. I'm sorry we missed them, but I'm glad we included them in the film.
Is there anybody that you couldn't get that's alive?
Well,
Obviously, if
as
they're dead, you don't get them.
As I said, Mel Brooks, we saw him at a restaurant afterwards, and he's supposed to go and see the film in Beverly Hills, so hopefully he'll see it. We wanted to get him.
Okay. Joan Rivers was in surgery?
Joan Rivers.
Where'd you get the film clips?
So that's an interesting question, where we got the film clips. There's really no archival footage that exists of the Catskills, comedians in the Catskills. So what we did, we researched Ed Sullivan, Steve Allen. Those were the Tonight Show, but mostly Ed Sullivan, Steve Allen, and the Gary Moore Show, and even the Dinah Shore Show of early days of television, and that's where we got the clips. And we looked for jokes that we knew that they would have told in the mountains. So we had to be very specific, because Lenny Bruce, for instance, you saw him on Steve Allen. And we also had to find jokes that were very short, in and out, because long jokes on a movie don't work very well. Lenny Bruce is a notorious long storyteller, so we had to find specific jokes. It was very challenging. So it was the early talk shows of television where we found the clips.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Two Gentiles enjoyed the movie.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
That's great.
Anybody else? How long did it take to put the film together?
As I said, the concept started way before 2008, but we started shooting in 2008 and finished this year.
Hey, what's the Catskills Institute?
It's Phil Brown, who is a professor at Brown University, and Phil is a collector of Catskill memorabilia. I mean, tons of material. If you Google Catskill, I don't know the exact website address, but if you Google Catskill Institute, you'll see postcards and photographs, and we got some of the. You saw the photograph with all those signs there. That was from Phil. He has things like that, and that connected me to a lot of other people all across the country. Actually, a lot of descendants of hotel owners who connected me to their stories.
One more question, anybody? Yes, sir.
There was a movement throughout the 50s where all the comedians show you how much they really love what they did. Would get together after all the shows, like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and do a jam session with the musicians and the comedians, and go on till I was a waiter, so I had to watch them till 2, 3 in the morning, and then get up at 7 to serve breakfast. So, but that went on all summer long.
The gentleman saying all summer long, the comedians after their shows would all get together at the Palestra.
Yeah.
That was Kutcher's, right? The Palestra?
Punchers, Raleigh, they would stick it around.
We found a little of that, residuals of that at the Friars Club, because when we would go to the Friars Club and interview, that's where Mickey Freeman was interviewed and several others, they were there having drinks and talking and schmoozing and talking about, it was like that. It was very interesting, fascinating. I wish I had a camera to film that.
This lady.
I was unfortunate, I never got to go to the Catskills, I always wanted to, so this is wonderful for me, so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
The other thing I just wanted to mention is that in Beverly Hills, at the Beverly Hills High School, they always have, I don't know, I haven't been for a couple years, a New York reunion.
Right.
Right.
And I go to that, even though I'm not from New York, just because that was like the Catskills for me. And I saw Dan Murray stood up when he was announced, and they said, oh, thank God, I thought I was dead.
This lady goes to the Beverly Hills High School reunion. Morris, the anti-Semitic bagels that they give you at Bonds. Morris, last question.
How did you manage to shoot Joe Franklin's office?
Oh, Joe Franklin's office belongs in the Smithsonian Institution.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, he is.
He doesn't look it.
I used to work, that's true. I used to work for Joe Franklin when I was a kid, when I graduated college. And then we went to interview him because he had a lot of these comics on his show. For all of those of you who know Joe Franklin, he was local TV, New York TV talk show host. And when I went into his office and we went in with our crew, the first thing he wanted to introduce us to was his archivist, who I said, when I looked at his office, I said, you're doing a heck of a job. I mean, his office was stacked to the ceiling. It looked just like that. That's why we put a wide shot in there. It was just remarkable.
Well, thank you, Ron Frank. I feel like Bob Hope. Thanks for the memories. That was great.